And she left me a voicemail afterwards and said, I was just so angry, I didn't think I could speak to you professionally. So what do you do when you catch yourself living and managing your life in fear of disappointing people around you? Boss, colleague, friend, your child. I'm Sheila Delaney, and I'm your host here at Crazy Beautiful Truth, where we are talking about loving ourselves back into our lives. We talk about the things that interfere with our vitality, like living in fear of disappointing others. I know that I have been there, that I've worried about disappointing people, so I hold myself back. I don't let them see all of me, lest I offend or disappoint in that way. On the flip side, sometimes it's acting like I've got it all together, lest I disappoint them by showing vulnerability. I've learned a lot over a lifetime of being a people about this in particular. I've also disappointed friends, clients, my children, and they've disappointed me. So it happens to the best of us. It just does. So in this episode, I'm going to share 3 approaches that have most helped me and my clients break free of this fear. Break free from worrying about those expectations, but also what to do when we've actually disappointed somebody, when that has actually happened, because as I said, it happens to the best of us. So that you can walk your own journey, befriend yourself in every season, and reclaim the vitality that is your birthright and makes life worth living. So if you and I are sitting together over coffee, this is what I'd have to say. And this is where we would start to challenge and break down the stories that keep us well behaved. The ones that can shrink us, silence us, or keep us small. So let's get into it. So here's the first point. Everyone is entitled to their journey. Your journey is your own. My journey is my own, and you and I are both entitled to the journey laid out in front of us. That means you are entitled to approach your life in a way that does not disappoint you. This is what is first and foremost. Glennon Doyle talks about parenting and talking to her kids and teaching them, you should set out to disappoint me. Don't worry about disappointing other people. Worry about disappointing yourself. And I could not back this message more. I'm so glad that this message is starting to get out there. And I've had this conversation with my kids as well. Do I want to be disappointed? No. But should I be the number one person whose opinion matters to them? Absolutely not. And vice versa. Because if I'm making decisions that are authentic to me, and you are making decisions authentic to you, anyone's disappointment about that is their own to carry. That is part of a journey they have chosen. They get to have it. So you don't get to tell them, don't be disappointed. They can have whatever they want, but it doesn't have to affect us the way that we're used to letting it affect us. The other part of this is that when we do let somebody down, when we do make a mistake and we disappoint another legitimately in a way that we also disappoint ourselves, we get to own that mistake, and that is a place of power and sovereignty and agency. The let them theory is really important here. Mel Robbins' book is doing such a great job of getting this out into the common vernacular and helping us, especially as women, to give ourselves permission to let other people have their lives, to have their journey, and then to claim our own and presume that we're entitled to that as well. I have a personal story on this, and I'm going a step further to a time where I did disappoint a client. And I disappointed myself in the process. And it was a situation where, I reside in just outside Seattle, Washington. But I grew up in Calgary, Alberta. So raised in Canada. And I was home visiting my mom. And it was right after some pretty wicked floods that Calgary had experienced. And all kinds of things were out of service. Roads were closed, all kinds of things. So I was supposed to be on a call with a client about a facilitation that I was doing coming up for their senior leadership team and their board. It was a big deal. I was not able to find connection. So we had that meeting. My co-facilitator was on that call. I didn't make it in at all. And so he handled that meeting. I started booking it to try to get to a place where there was reception. And when I got there, I called her and she didn't answer. And she left me a voicemail afterwards and said, I was just so angry, I didn't think I could speak to you professionally. And I tell you, that's a lot, right? Like, how many of you are cringing listening to this story right now? To have a client that disappointed, that affected by an actual, whether it was avoidable or not on my point, with my part was not the point. I wasn't there. I hadn't fulfilled a commitment, and I was speechless with distress on this, which she could pick up. But here's the thing. I had to show up a week later after missing that call in front of the board, in front of the senior leadership team, and I had to show up in my power. I had to show up in my presence and facilitate 3 days of strategy and connectedness and team building and clarity without dropping my chin, right? Without keeping my eyes downcast. So I called her, we did connect, and I explained what had happened. And she was still upset, which she was entitled to be. I was profoundly apologetic. And I said this to her. I said, I am going to need to show up 100% in my power. I don't want you to misunderstand. When I show up in that room, my chin held high, my eyes positive, showing up in focus and with a view to success for those 3 days, that means that I didn't appreciate the impact of this on you. And we had a great conversation about it. And she said, nope, I agree. We got to shake this off and know that I'm going to be holding you in success. Anything that you and I need to deal with after the fact, we will deal with after the fact. And we did. And so let me tell you what happened in this case. Because I was able to get a hold of her, take responsibility, apologize, because we came to an agreement about what the next step would look like and how I would have to be in my power. So often when we disappoint somebody, we feel like and I've seen this with clients, and I've felt this myself. There is this behavior, this posturing that we feel we need to take on in order to prove that we appreciate our impact. And so if I show up all glib, people are like, the nerve. Does she not know what happened? And yet we need to show up. The effect of this, in a very interesting way, was to grow my self-trust, which is usually the first thing compromised when we let somebody down and we've disappointed ourselves and others, is we lose trust with ourselves. The trust that I grew was in my own resilience, my ability to make a mistake, bounce back, show up, facilitate an outstanding experience for my client, which I did in my power, working with my colleague, an outstanding co-facilitator to whom I was very grateful for running with this meeting. And so some good things came out of it. And this client and I, because we were able to come to restoration, good things happened. So I invite you to think about a time where you have actually disappointed somebody and disappointed yourself, and what shifted when you realized that you had some sovereignty, you had some power in what happened next. So far we're talking about the let them theory, that everyone is entitled to their own journey, and that includes you. Key message number 2 then is that being friendly with all of the parts of yourself in your seasons of expansion and contraction, which are just part of the cycles of life, means that you get to be different every day. You get to change your mind. I get to change my mind from one day to the next. It's part of our rhythms and seasons as humans, where we move through expansion, where we're very outward focused. We can be service oriented. We can take in what's going on with other people. And then we contract and we look at what's going on. What am I learning? And we look inward for a season. And then we expand again. We move through expansion and contraction. And when you become aware of this, things become profoundly different. So when people are expecting you to be in expansion all the time, all the time, all the time, all the time, and you begin to retreat, people get disappointed. Their problem, not yours. But this contraction allows us to turn inward and say, what do I need to integrate? Where do I need to rest? What does my body have to say to me? What wisdom is asking for my attention right now? So for example, when we get sick, when we're tripping all the time, when I've been sitting and focused for too long at my desk and I realize I haven't eaten, I'm absolutely starving, and I'm totally dehydrated. So both this expansion and this contraction are necessary, and they are sacred. They're sacred. And when you can meet yourself kindly, when you can befriend all of the parts of yourself in all of those seasons, I believe absolutely that allows us to befriend and be kind to all of the parts of other people. When we meet them, it increases our capacity for compassion, for empathy, for understanding, for grace. So that when we are disappointed, because let's be clear, we're talking about us living in fear of disappointing others. I guarantee you there was somebody out there who lives in fear of disappointing you. What do you do with that information? Being friendly with all the parts of ourselves helps us to meet and understand when other people are going through expansion and contraction. This is not about avoiding accountability. This is about holding what is real and true. We don't owe people explanations or apologies when it is something true to ourselves. We can meet others in relationship to facilitate connection when those expectations aren't aligned or don't meet what we were hoping for. Is this making sense? Let me know in the comments. If I lose you, tell me where in the comments so that I know. I was a person who was all about too many yeses. And this is when, if you've listened to the opening episode of season 1, where I told a good part of my story, I was super involved in the school with both my daughters in their classrooms specifically. I was involved with the Parents Guild at my daughter's dance school. I was involved with my daughter's soccer team. I was on the board of a philanthropic organization, right? It was constantly, yes, 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 I'll do it. And I loved it. Let's be clear. I was not doing this as a martyr or out of self-sacrifice. I enjoyed it, but I overcommitted. And my body eventually shut down, and I had to withdraw from every board position and every leadership position that I was involved in at that moment. My body needed attention and care, and it was a 3 to 4 year long process of trying to get that all back together. I had, and this was the highest compliment or acknowledgement maybe, a friend of mine told me recently that she thinks of me as the queen of boundaries, that I have better boundaries than anybody she knows. I both have them and I can honor and respect them from others. I am very attentive to boundaries. I give women in my space permission to have them. I give my kids permission to have them. We should all have them. So if I want to claim them, you also get to have them. This has been such a huge, massive area of growth for me, and it required me being friendly with the parts of myself that knew when to go, hold up. Not now. Maybe later, maybe not ever, or straight up no. It also gave me much clear access to my yeses. So being friendly with all of the parts of myself, let me get more intimate. Let me ask better questions. And I'm like, I'm feeling resistance to this. Is that because I'm feeling avoidant or tired, or because I know it's not something that I want to do right now? All of which are valid. So as we're thinking about this second piece that we would be talking about if we were sitting at coffee, you and I, to be friendly with all of the parts of yourself during all of the seasons that you move through. When is the time that you gave yourself permission to rest, to listen to what your body needed, to what your mind needed, to step away from a really complex and interesting problem and go for a walk, to go sit under a tree, to take a shower, to turn on music and have a little dance break? Notice that befriending is a huge part of our growth. So here's our third thing we'd be talking about if you and I are sitting at coffee. Vitality is your birthright. It is not a luxury. You are entitled to feel connected to your own wonder, creativity, joy, aliveness, and love. These are not luxuries. These are signs that you are engaged in the world. So doing the inner work to love yourself back to life when you are feeling depleted or exhausted or discouraged, lonely, isolated, any of those things is not indulgent. It is deeply of service, first and foremost to you. And that's important. There is nothing wrong with it being of service to you. Please, please, if you take one thing away from this, please prioritize yourself and let that be okay. And it is of service to everybody around you and the people who depend on you also. Because, by the way, when we stay connected to our vitality, we are actually less likely to make the mistakes or to get out of alignment, to come into misunderstanding that disappoints either ourselves or others. So when you reclaim your vitality, you have much more to give with much more clarity and integrity and authenticity to your work, to your relationships in this whole big, messy, beautiful world that we're a part of. I had a season in my life, like many others, where all of my strength and creativity was being misapplied. And this is a really interesting place to live through and look back on when somebody is a student of human behavior, as I am. So all of my strength, all of my creativity was being misapplied to keeping alive a relationship that was long complete. And so I was depleted everywhere else because I was trying to be, how creative can I get? What haven't I tried? And too many of us stay too long in jobs, in relationships, in friendships that have just come to a close. It is part of life and it's part of what happens. And we can honor the grief and the sorrow and also the blessings and the beauty of those friendships, relationships, jobs, places of service. The excruciating move to allow this relationship to come to a close liberated my creativity and my strength. Let me tell you, when that was no longer sucking away the best of my thinking and my feeling, and when my imagination was no longer absorbed with, well, what if, well, what if, well, what if, either ways I could salvage this or invest in it a particular way, or when I was angry or hurt, my imagination was pointed to, well, let me just show you. I tell you what, when I had that back, when I had that creativity back, when I had that strength back, when they were back inside of my body and not being misapplied, I got to point them to all kinds of things, including eventually this podcast, which has been nothing but joy for me. Nothing but joy. Nothing but joy. So I invite you to think about a moment that you personally reclaimed vitality. I guarantee you there was a time. And it could be that you did it consciously, or you could be you moved through something hard and suddenly you were able to find it again. It could be after burnout. It could be after a time that you said no and suddenly you had a little bit more spaciousness. It could be through travel or novelty, doing something differently and disrupting the day-to-day routine. I know that's a big one for me. That changes everything if I can just disrupt my pattern. And how that changed what you were able to pour into others and pour into the world. So there it is. So if you and I were wrapping up coffee right now, we would have deconstructed these stories that keep us well behaved and made really clear they're not serving you and they're not serving me. So question them, rewrite them, live the story that actually is your own. And then remember these three key things. The journey is your own and everyone is entitled to their journey. That we can befriend and be friendly to and with all of the parts of ourselves through all of the seasons. And that working on this, I tell you, working on this is really good medicine. And then thirdly, vitality is your birthright. This is not a thing you should have to fight for. And I want to give a special acknowledgement to people who are dealing with autoimmune disease, who are dealing with chronic illness, who are dealing with grief and sorrow and battles that nobody else can relate to, that you didn't imagine you'd ever have to be in, whether that's health, whether that's relationship. Because while vitality is your birthright, sometimes we get lessons that require our vitality. And please know that your vitality is serving you even when you're tired, if you are in one of those positions in your phase of life right now. So I bow to the experience that you are in. And please do what you can to ask for help, to ask for support, to befriend all of the parts of you that are going through this challenge, and to entitle others to have their journey. They may or may not know what to do and how to support you, and they may live in disappointment, fear of disappointing you in the process and wishing you were different. That is not your problem. That is not your problem. You are entitled to your own journey, and you get to choose a lot of things about it. With that, reach out on LinkedIn, reach out on Instagram, drop a comment in YouTube or on whatever platform you are catching this on. I read every comment and I love hearing from you. Thank you for being here. This is Crazy Beautiful Truth, and I'm Sheila Delaney.